The Peregrine slips beneath the surface at 0600 hours on a Tuesday, and nobody on the dock waves goodbye. 12 people, 3 cats, and enough unanswered questions to fill an ocean. The uncharted trench waiting below has no official name on any public map. Only a set of coordinates that Kibben wrote in his field journal 3 years ago and hasn't been able to forget since. On the bridge, Captain Erica Vasquez reviews her mission parameters for the 4th time since departure, and for the 4th time something doesn't add up. The equipment manifest Kibben submitted lists deep core acoustic receivers, not standard research gear. Not even close. She makes a note on her clipboard in small, precise letters and says nothing. Not yet. Jameson is already filming. He films the amber glow of the instrument panels, the black water climbing the viewports as they sink, Mert delivering coffee with flour still on his left cheek. He films Daniela standing alone near the aft corridor, her encrypted tablet pressed to her chest, watching Kibben the way a person watches something they've been paid to watch. Kibben himself sits in the mess hall with his battered leather journal open, a cup of tea going cold beside him. His broad shoulders are hunched inward, and his round tortoiseshell glasses catch the amber light. He is not reading the journal so much as staring at a particular page. A page dense with waveform diagrams, as if the diagram might change if he looks at it long enough. Jupiter, the small tortoiseshell cat, is asleep against the warm engine housing near the mess hall entrance, until Kibben stands to refill his tea. She opens her enormous blue eyes, registers him, and is simply gone. No drama. No hiss. Just an empty spot where a cat used to be. Hobo watches this from a high shelf and tucks his paws more firmly beneath himself, green eyes narrowed. Even Orpheus, from his perch above the equipment lockers, shifts his jet-black body fractionally away. Sanskriti notices all 3 cats doing it. She's been watching because Sanskriti notices things. It's the same instinct that makes her a brilliant sonar tech, that compulsion to detect patterns and noise. She leans over to Hudson at the bench beside her and says, quietly, every single time, "You think animals can smell something wrong with a person?" Hudson just grins his dimpled grin and says, "Or he smells like something they don't trust." He's joking. Mostly. At 1,000 meters, the ocean outside the viewports is absolute black. No gradient, no glow, just nothing, pressing in from every angle with the patient weight of 10 million tons of water. It is here, in this specific dark, that Sanskriti's sonar display does something it has never done in the 3 years she's operated this equipment. The signal is low, subsonic, almost, but structured in a way that random geological noise simply isn't. Sanskriti tears off her headphones and stares at the display, then puts them back on, then tears them off again. She pulls up the frequency charts on the wall and finds nothing that matches. Her hands, when she reaches for the intercom to call the bridge, are shaking slightly, not from fear, she would say later, but from excitement. She would not say that afterward. She reports it to Erica directly. And Kibben, passing the sonar bay doorway with his field journal under one arm, stops walking. He doesn't enter. He simply stops, and through the acoustic foam walls he hears Sanskriti describe the frequency, the rhythm, the impossible structure of it. And all the color that was left in his face goes somewhere else. He says nothing. He walks away. Later, Julian will see him in the engine corridor, standing completely still with his palm flat against the cold steel wall, and assume he's checking vibration frequencies. Julian assumes a lot of reasonable things early in this story. It is one of the things that will cost them time they don't have. Between 1,000 and 3,000 meters the signal grows. It doesn't announce itself, it simply accumulates, the way pressure does, in small increments that the body adjusts to without noticing until the adjustment itself becomes the problem. The crew adjusts. Some sleep more soundly than usual and mistake it for peace. Jameson starts humming while he edits footage. He doesn't know any of the songs he's humming. Ethan is harder to read because Ethan has always been hard to read. He stands in the engine corridor for 20 minutes at a stretch, and Dave politely asks if he needs something, and Ethan says, "Diagnostic," in his flat, quiet voice, and Dave nods and moves on. But Dave mentions it to Julian that evening, and Julian files it away somewhere in the back of his tired, sharp mind. It's Jameson who catches a glimpse of the journal. Kibben has left his cabin door open 3 inches while he moves around inside, and Jameson, passing in the corridor with his camera, frames the gap without thinking. It's a reflex by now. Through the gap he sees a page covered in dense waveform diagrams, and repeated in the margins, in handwriting that grows increasingly ragged toward the bottom of the page. It calls back the ones it has already touched. Jameson doesn't stop walking, but he does stop humming. Hudson pulls Drea aside near the lab module door, checking over his shoulder before he speaks. He tells her he thinks the mission is a cover, that Kibben and Daniela are running an extraction play, some kind of biological resource harvest from the trench. Drea listens seriously, specimen jar in hand, pushing her messy auburn bun back with a pencil. She doesn't dismiss it. She says she'll watch. What she's watching for, neither of them quite knows yet. At 4,000 meters, the Peregrine finds Hudson. Or rather, Julian finds Hudson. He's in the dive lock, and he is not moving, and the wrench lying 2 feet from his body belongs to Kibben's kit. Julian stands in the hatchway for a long moment and breathes. Then he goes to tell Erica. He doesn't touch anything. It is the most useful thing he does in the next 6 hours. Erica locks the submarine down in under 4 minutes. She does it the way she does everything, with a terrible, composed efficiency that makes it worse somehow, because it means she's already thought about what to do if this happened. When the announcement comes over the intercom, Mert drops an entire pan of flatbread. The clatter echoes down 3 corridors. The footage review begins with Kibben. It has 3 crew members confirm he argued with Hudson that afternoon in the mess hall. Voices raised, Kibben's field journal slapped down on the steel table hard enough to slide. Hudson's own tablet, recovered from his bunk, contains a drafted but unsent message. A detailed accusation, addressed to Daniela's employer, alleging Kibben planned to harvest a biological material from the trench worth billions on the gray market. It's damning. It is almost too damning. Daniela pushes, loudly and clinically, for Kibben's immediate confinement. Even Drea, empathetic, fair-minded Drea, admits out loud that the evidence is difficult to argue with. Kibben is walked to his cabin. The door is locked from the outside. Through the steel door, in the silence after, the crew hears him say with absolute distinctness, "The signal chose someone. It is not me." Count, who was near the receiver when Sanskriti first heard it. By morning, or what the ship's clock insists is morning, Orpheus, Hobo, and Jupiter are sleeping in a row outside Kibben's locked door. No one moved them there. No one fed them there. They simply chose it, 3 cats arranged in descending size, facing the locked door with the particular patience of animals who have already decided something the humans haven't caught up to yet. Giselle sees the cats and stops walking. Her gold-rimmed glasses catch the light as she looks from them to the door and back again. She is the quieter sister, the methodical one. She doesn't speak without being certain she has something worth saying. She finds Julian in the engine corridor and says simply, "The cats went to him. After the murder. Not away from him. To him. Doesn't that mean something?" Julian looks at her for a long moment. Then he goes and unlocks the door. In his cabin, surrounded by bathymetric maps and waveform printouts, Kibben tells them the truth. 3 years ago. A different vessel, a different trench crossing, and a signal that washed through the sonar at 2,200 meters. He heard it clearly. And then he woke up 2 days later with no memory, surrounded by crew members who looked at him as if they were deciding something. 2 of them died within the month, ruled accidental. He has been trying to prove what happened ever since. The signal, he says, appears to use certain minds as hosts, not permanently, but as instruments. It attempts and sometimes fails. It failed with him. He thinks it failed because it couldn't hold him, something in how his particular brain processes low-frequency acoustic input. He is, in the cruelest way, immune. Which means he has been watching what it does to others for 3 years and has been unable to convince a single person it is real. Until now. Until Hudson. Sanskriti reviews her sonar logs alone in the sonar bay, and when she finds what she finds, she sits very still for a moment before she calls anyone. The signal peaked, maximum amplitude, maximum structure, at 11:54 p.m. At 11:52 p.m., the internal door log records Ethan entering the sonar bay to run a routine diagnostic. There is no logged work order. Systems techs run midnight diagnostics with work orders. Always. She knows this because she has filed complaints about undocumented maintenance interruptions before. She knows this precisely. Julian pulls Ethan's system access logs and finds the camera rerouting within 2 hours. It's elegant, actually. Small timed power draws on the internal camera grid, shifted to Ethan's own terminal on a rotating schedule that created a 90-minute gap in the dive lock corridor footage with no single obvious cause. Not a deletion. A gap made to look like a glitch. It would have worked, Julian admits to himself, if they hadn't been looking for it specifically. His jaw is tight when he closes the terminal. They find Ethan in the engine corridor. Of course they do. He is standing with his back to them, one palm pressed flat against the steel hull, and he is perfectly, completely motionless. The way a person is motionless only when they have stopped caring about appearing natural. The deep rhythmic thrum of the engines fills the silence. Nobody says his name at first. Then Erica does, in her captain's voice, the one that has never once failed to make a person turn around. Ethan turns around slowly. His face is wrong. Not violent, that would be easier. It is calm in a way that human faces simply aren't. A stillness that belongs to something that has never had to perform comfort or discomfort for an audience. He speaks in his own voice. The words are his words. But they arrive in partial sentences that dissolve at their ends into something below the range of speech. A resonance the crew feels in their back teeth more than hears. He says, in a voice like Ethan's voice being played on the wrong instrument, Hudson would have surfaced. Hudson would have warned. The work must complete. And then something shifts behind his eyes, something smaller, something frightened, something that remembers its own name. For perhaps 8 seconds, Ethan is entirely present. He looks at Julian and says, "Seal the sonar bay." He looks at Sanskriti and he says, "I'm sorry." And then the other thing comes back, smooth and immediate as a tide, and his face goes calm again. Sanskriti makes a sound that is not quite a word. Nobody moves for a long moment. Then Erica says, "Restrain him," and they do. They secure Ethan's wrists with emergency restraint zip ties from the first aid locker and put him in the forward storage compartment, the only lockable room that isn't critical to operations. He doesn't resist. He sits where they place him, hands in his lap, and looks at the middle distance with an expression of mild patience, as if waiting for something none of them can see. Daniela speaks then, and what she says stops the room cold. She opens her encrypted tablet and lays it on the mess hall table, screen up, and she does not apologize for any of it. The classified letterhead is visible from across the table. "I wasn't here to watch Kibben," she says. "I was here to watch for this. The signal has been fragmenting into receiving stations on 3 continents for 40 years. My office has been waiting for someone to go deep enough to find the source." Kibben, standing in the doorway still technically under supervision, lets out a breath that sounds like it has been held for 3 years. "You knew it was real," he says. "Your office knew, and you let people keep going down." Daniela doesn't flinch. "We needed a confirmed source location," she says. "We have protocol for a compromised crew member. The protocol assumes containment is still possible." A long silence. "And now?" Kibben asks. She looks at the tablet. "Now we follow what's left of it. The protocol, it turns out, has a gap the size of a trench. It does not account for a compromised crew member who spent 4 days quietly rewriting the navigation system in increments small enough to log as routine maintenance. Dave confirms it within 20 minutes in the engine corridor, voice carefully neutral over the comm. The ascent commands are being accepted by the interface and quietly overridden below the command layer. The sub is not rising. The sub is descending. Julian and Dave work side by side in the engine corridor with everything they have. Julian's hands move over conduit panels with the muscle memory of 15 years, rerouting, bypassing, trying to find anything Ethan hadn't already touched. Dave's massive wrench is useless here. This isn't a mechanical problem, it's a surgical one, and the surgery has already been performed. Still, Dave hands Julian tools before Julian asks for them, and neither of them speaks about what happens if they fail. On the bridge, Erica watches the depth counter and does not sit down. The hull groans intermittently now, not in distress, but in the specific register of a vessel being asked to go deeper than its rated tolerance. Julian's voice crackles over the comm with updates that slowly change in character from "working on it" to "there's something else going on." Then the exterior cameras come back online, angled at the trench wall. And every person on the bridge goes quiet at once. The trench wall is not the trench wall. What the floodlights illuminate in slow, terrible clarity are ribbed formations the size of buildings, curved, organic, pressed against the basalt like something that has been resting there for an epoch. They pulse. The rhythm is exactly the rhythm Sanskriti charted. Kibben opens his field journal to a page dense with sketches and says, very quietly, the last coordinates before I blacked out 3 years ago were 400 meters directly above us right now. The peregrine settles into a concave depression in the organism's exterior with a sound that is not a collision, it is a click. Perfect, mechanical, inevitable. The kind of fit that implies the hollow was shaped for exactly this purpose, or shaped itself to be, over time, over repeated approach. The exterior cameras show the organism's surface material beginning to close at the edges of the hull, slowly, without violence. Embracing. Then the signal stops needing sonar equipment. It is simply there, in the hull plating, in the air, in the chest. A bone-deep resonance below the threshold of sound that the body receives before the ears do. Drea grabs the lab table and stays upright. Giselle sits down on the floor deliberately, methodically, as if filing the experience under something she'll analyze later. And then her hands go still and she doesn't move again. Jameson's camera keeps recording from where he left it on the mess hall table, lens pointed at the door. Mert is found in the mess hall by nobody. Jameson's camera finds him instead. He is curled under the long steel table with his cook's apron pulled over his head, knees to his chest, and he is humming. It is not a song. It is the signal's rhythm, note perfect, produced without apparent awareness by a 22-year-old who had never heard the sonar recording and who is also, clearly, crying. Tears running silently down his face and dripping off his jaw, his eyes open and unseeing. Kibben moves through the sub doing what he can, which is almost nothing. He has immunity to the signal the way a man has immunity to a disease that already nearly killed him. It does not reach him, but it takes everyone else, and he has to watch. He finds Sanskriti still in the sonar bay, headphones around her neck, staring at the pulsing display with her mouth slightly open. He touches her shoulder and she turns, and for a moment she is there, completely, sharply there. She looks at the headphones. Then at him. Sanskriti takes the headphones from around her neck and lifts them deliberately and settles them over Kibben's ears. They are tuned to block exactly the frequency range she spent the last 18 hours analyzing. The resonance diminishes to a murmur. She looks at him with perfect clarity and says, "Don't listen." Then the clarity leaves her face like a tide going out. Her hands drop. She sits back in her chair and goes still, and her eyes close, and she breathes evenly, and she is gone in the way that is not death but is not presence either. On the bridge, Erica records a final log entry. She reads her own name, her rank, the vessel's name, the date. Her voice is level. She reads them the way a person reads the words on their own gravestone, insisting on the fact of them, insisting that facts persist. She sets the clipboard on the arm of the captain's chair. She folds her hands in her lap. She closes her eyes. The depth counter on the panel behind her keeps moving. Julian seals himself in the engine room. He does this methodically, dogging the hatch from the inside, and he does not let himself think about the people on the other side of it. The Sanskriti-shaped person in the sonar bay. The Erica-shaped person on the bridge. He pulls off an access panel and reaches inside with both hands and finds the manual power coupling for the ballast surge. A partial overload, the kind that might shake a vessel free if something had hold of it. He triggers it. The hull groans like something in pain. The lights die to emergency red. Nothing moves. In the red-lit silence after the surge, 3 shapes move through the stillness of the peregrine. The only shapes that are still moving of their own uncomplicated accord. Orpheus first, stepping deliberately over a motionless form in the corridor, white star patch on his chest catching the red emergency glow. Hobo behind him, low and pragmatic. Jupiter last, her tortoiseshell bulk unhurried, blue eyes wide and catching light. They are entirely calm. They have been calm since the beginning. They were always going to outlast the noise. They gather in Kibben's cabin. Of course they do. It is the only room in the ship where the signal finds no purchase, marked by the electromagnetic trace of a failed attempt, a rejected host, something the organism tried and abandoned. The 3 cats arrange themselves on his narrow bunk, Orpheus anchoring the center, Hobo pressed against the wall, Jupiter a warm round weight at the foot. They do not sleep. They watch the door. Outside, Jameson's camera runs on battery power in the mess hall, lens angled through the interior porthole of Kibben's cabin door. The exterior cameras, still drawing power from the emergency reserve, capture the last thing anyone will see from the peregrine. The organism is moving, not releasing, never releasing, but pulling back into the deeper dark, inhaling, descending, taking the sub with it toward depths that have no number on any human chart. The trench wall rises past the camera frame. The bioluminescence dims. The signal does not stop. It transmits upward through miles of black water, patient and perfect and complete, looking for the next thing foolish enough to come listening. Jameson's camera catches the last image before the battery dies. Through the small porthole of Keben's cabin door, 3 pairs of eyes, amber, green, blue, open and steady in the red flickering dark, watching calmly as everything else goes out. Then the red flickers once. Then dark. Then only the signal, still rising. Patient. Complete. Already looking upward.